Hi, I'm Femi OK. Japan's Chrysanthemum Throne sits empty following the abdication of Emperor Akihito. Today, we take a look at the impact of the Imperial family on Japanese society and share your thoughts. Tweet us at AJStream or leave your comments in our live YouTube chat, and you too can be in the stream.
今日をもち、天皇としての務めを終えることになりました。
For the first time in more than 200 years, a Japanese emperor has abdicated. Emperor Akihito will be replaced by his son, Crown Prince Naruhito, in a ceremony on Wednesday. Naruhito's accession to the throne is raising questions about the importance of the imperial family and what it means to be emperor. Joining us to discuss this, Sakura Murakami. She's a reporter with the Japan Times. Roland Keltz is a journalist and author of Japan America. And we also have Wakako Fukuda. She's an activist and former member of the organization SEALS, also known as Students' Emergency Action for Liberal Democracy. Welcome, everybody. Is there a greeting that I need to give you for the beginning of a brand new era? What would you say to each other in Japan? Exactly. Consider that said. Consider that said to yourself. All right. So guess. Let me show you this. This picture, Sakura. I know you've been covering this end of an era, beginning of a new era. People standing outside of the Imperial Palace taking pictures. I don't think they could see the ceremony from there, but they were certainly out there enthusiastically marking this moment. What is the atmosphere like in Japan as one emperor stands down and you're about to see a new emperor come into being?
I think in general, it's been very much about gratitude towards the Emperor Emeritus Akihito. He really carved out, he developed a very close relationship with the people. So people are very grateful for his reign and also looking forward to the new era and what it would bring as well. So in general, it's a bit of gratitude, also sentimentalism, and looking forward to the new era as well.
Roland, I know that you're a cultural aficionado of Japanese culture. How would you describe what is happening right now? What is this moment? How will people write about it in the future?
Well, I think in the short term, it's just an excuse for a celebration. You know, this is Golden Week in Japan. It's an unprecedented 10-day holiday. And I think people were shooting fireworks in a rather remote region called Gifu. And I think it's just, in some ways, it's just a lot of fun. And I think, you know, for people of my uncle's generation who are in their 70s or 80s, it's an emotional moment, but it's also a moment, as Sakura said, of gratitude that Japan has had, you know, 30 years of peace and really, relatively speaking, prosperity.
Wakako, I'm thinking about the legacy of Emperor Akihito, who is standing down. From a young person's point of view, what is his legacy? How would you sum it up?
I think he will be remembered for his dedication for peace, as like taking war-related trips to abroad and like paying the respect to other countries, which no other emperors did before. And so that was something we've never seen before. But also he's the first emperor for, you know, for young generation like me, who was born in Heisei era.
I'm going to show this picture here. Sakura, this is a story that you wrote. Emperor Akihito, a unifying figure who carved out a role as Japan's symbol of state. I'm going to show something very simple here. The former emperor and the empress, they are kneeling, talking to people. Seems like a very normal, natural, everyday thing to do. But there's something there which marks a difference from previous ways that emperors and empresses have behaved in Japan. Can you share that with our audience who may not have noticed that there's anything unusual about this picture?
It's interesting you point that out, because these the emperor and empress, Emperor Emeritus and Emperor Emeritus right now, is kneeling on the floor, on the cold, hard wooden floor of an evacuation center of a place that was struck by a disaster. I think this was back in the early 90s, but this is very, very rare for an emperor to do this. It was unheard of before Akihito, basically. Up until the end of World War II, emperors were deified figures. They were said to be descendants of God, and they were very sacred beings. And to think that they would kneel on the floor with a commoner and talk to them at eye level, that was unthinkable. But Akihito really took the role of being a symbol of the state into his own hands and created this, a new role for himself, I suppose, of being much closer to the people and really talking to them, connecting to them on a closer level at eye level.
And that picture that I showed a little bit earlier, that was 1991, and that was just after a volcanic eruption. And there were so many other natural disasters where the former emperor, the former empress, they were there, and they showed their humanity. Roland, I'm just looking at...
I think,
go
I
ahead,
just want to
Roland.
add, I mean, I think Sakura makes an excellent point, which is that this particular reign, the Heisei emperor, in a way, it was a sort of gradual and quite extraordinary shift, because if you think about what happened at the end of World War II, Akihito's father, Hirohito, was stripped of his divinity, which in some ways was a kind of tragedy that the godliness of the emperor was destroyed by the occupation of the Americans in the 1940s. And then this emperor gradually, quite beautifully, after 1989, takes his power and his prestige directly to the people. And it's a beautiful thing in Japan. I think the way change can happen here, it can be very frustrating because Japan, can be slow to change. But, compared to the United States, where people talk about change all the time, and it rarely happens because, debate takes over, or Europe, look at Brexit, right? Everybody's debating all the time and nothing actually happens. In Japan, what I've seen is that people don't talk about change so much, but when it happens, it can happen quite intensely and quite beautifully.
A lot of media...
And I think... Oh, sorry.
Sakura, go ahead.
Yes, and I think part of the reason that Emperor Akihito was able to create this new role for himself was because in the constitution, it just says that the emperor is a symbol of the state, and that's about it. There's just that one word, being a symbol, and no real guideline as to what that's supposed to mean. So that vagueness and that ambiguity really actually helped him sort of create that role for himself as well.
I'm just looking at this page here from Sora News 24, and this sign here, the people in Japan were waiting. What is this new era going to be called? And this here is what it was called. You know now, it's Reiwa. Open to interpretation, but beautiful harmony was the one that the Parliament was saying, no, this is what it means. It means beautiful harmony. So we are now in the era of beautiful harmony. But what does that mean, Wakako? What are you hoping for coming up for this next era in Japan?
So people, especially young people, are very excited to be living in a new era, which they didn't really expect or never really thought about. I expect this era I expect, including myself, young people to create a better society, more diverse, somehow more international and a little less traditional, a little less Japanese traditionally.
I'm looking here.
Yeah, I think...
Yes, go ahead, Roland.
I was just to add, I think what Wakako's been doing she's quite young and actually creating social movements in the Japan of the 21st century is a sign of that new Reiwa era, which is a sign that beautiful harmony can include the melodic tones of protest.
I'm just looking at here, there are a lot of media outlets which are explaining what is it that the Japanese emperor actually does. So this is Associated AFP. So here are the main duties of the Japanese emperor. signing documents, opening sessions of parliament, awarding honours, plays key part in numerous rituals, no political power. Sakura, how do you think the new emperor is going to deal with this? This doesn't sound like a dream job to me.
Well, I suppose it's not a dream job for many, but that is the role of the emperor. He is a symbol of the state. He has no political power. That was part of the reason that he was able to. The imperial family was able to continue after the World War II. After World War II, they were stripped of political power, and therefore they were able to continue to kind of reign or continue the Chrysanthemum Throne in general. What that means for now Emperor Naruhito, I'm sure that he will continue previous Emperor Akihito's legacy as well. Emperor Akihito is very popular with the public, so he'll probably kind of take a lot of leaves out of Akihito's books, but then he'll add his own touch to the Chrysanthemum Throne as well.
Yes, Roland.
Yeah, I was just going to add that he also is entering the role of emperor with an absolutely brilliant partner. His wife, Masako, is multilingual. She's educated. She has a degree from Harvard. She was in the diplomatic corps for Japan when he proposed marriage. And she gave it pretty long, good thought before she accepted.
Do I want to be future Empress of Japan? Let me have a thing here. Who wants that job?
No kidding. That was a symbol, a sign of her wisdom.
Yeah.
She's a shrewd and brilliant woman. And I think in some ways that more significant than Naruhito's rise to the throne is the rise of his wife.
Let's look at this family picture, because I am wondering, and people who don't have royal families in their countries always ask, what is the point of your royal family? Why do they still exist? So I know this personally, and I can appreciate this from a Japanese point of view. So let me do a show and tell who is who and where they are and their place. So this is Emperor-to-be Naruhito. This is his wife, Empress-to-be Masako. And then we've got the former emperor, the former empress. This is the younger brother and his wife. These are their 3 children. Eldest, next, and then the youngest. We'll talk about him in just a minute. And then this is the now emperor and empress's only daughter, Aiko. So this royal family, do you care about them, Wakoko? Do young people even care about them and their position, and are they relevant?
Honestly, I don't think a lot of young people recognize them.
Could they name them? I mean, I just strained to name every single one. Because if I went to the street and found a 17-year-old a young man or young woman, would they be able to tell me who everybody was in this picture?
Not everyone.
Who would they like the most in the picture, do you think?
Like the most, definitely Akihito and Michiko, for sure.
Okay.
And the daughter of Naruhito, Aiko, since she's the only child of the upcoming emperor and empress.
Right. I'm just thinking, Sakura, about what it is that the new emperor is able to do. His father paved the way in terms of modernizing what the royal family is expected and the expectations. Now what happens?
Well, this kind of goes on the point that Roland was mentioning earlier as well, but the Emperor Naruhito, he was Oxford educated. He's very interested in global issues like water conservation. His wife was also a former diplomat, Harvard educated. So they both bring a very international touch to the Chrysanthemum Throne, which I think is pretty much a first. And this kind of connects with the whole Reiwa, beautiful harmony, era name as well, and also the fact that Japan is becoming more and more diverse. There are more foreign residents living in Japan. Earlier in April, the government introduced a new visa where foreign laborers can work in Japan as well. So in a country that's diversifying, where there are more different cultural differences as well, I think the new emperor and empress will be able to bring that international touch and sort of represent the country in that respect as well. So that's something,
We asked our online community what it means to them. What do they think the new emperor might be able to do? Isaiah actually pointed this out. He says on Twitter, he studied in Oxford and the wife is a Harvard graduate. I think they will strengthen their culture more, build a better relationship with the Japanese society and the world. Yes, Roland, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, to Wakako's point, tonight over dinner, I was talking with a friend of mine who's a film director, and I said, I don't think anyone in Japan under 40 or even 50 cares about the new emperor, really. And he turned to me and he said, are you kidding? He said, no one under 70 cares about the new emperor. I mean, forget 40 and 50. But in a way, as we were talking about it, we were saying, maybe that's a good thing. Because if you lived in a country where people were obsessed about the emperor, that could be quite dangerous and scary. I mean, one of the things that Japan has managed to elude or avoid in the 21st century is this kind of populistic, hyper-nationalistic rhetoric that you see in many countries in the West, including the United States, including Great Britain, including parts of Western Europe. Japan has not so far fallen into that gutter of nationalistic populism. There are nationalists here, but Japan hasn't turned that way as a majority of the population.
But Roland,
and so in some ways,
don't you feel that is changing somewhat with the idea of that Japan doesn't have to always kowtow to the relationship that it had or the way that it was thought about after World War II and trying to get Japanese pride back, which is a little different from what is happening in other countries that you mentioned, but that sense of Japan being proud of itself and not having to keep referring back to World War II?
Well, it's definitely changing. And, one of the symbolic elements of the Reiwa kanji, the characters that are used for the name, is that they're actually taken for the first time from a Japanese work of literature.
Yes, and not using Chinese characters.
That's right.
And,
exactly.
and so that is something that is very different, yes.
But I think Japan has to do that because if you look at what's happening geopolitically, Japan is in some ways is living through a transition of geopolitics. The U.S., whatever degree you want to talk about it, is in some ways shifting. Whether it's declining or not, we don't know, but it's shifting. And China is definitely rising. So Japan is between these two world powers, and it has to carve out a place for itself. That doesn't necessarily mean nationalism,
I hear you.
But it means some reckoning of identity.
I want to introduce into our conversation Chihoko Goto. She is a senior Northeast Asia associate at the Wilson Center. She's been thinking about this change of era in Japan. Have a listen to her.
The Japanese monarchy actually represents a sense of unity in the country. It is a continuum of Japanese history, not over a millennia, but actually 2 millennia. It really epitomizes Japan's own tradition of having a figurehead really representing the people and the values that it espouses. The challenge with this new emperor and his wife is whether they can actually meet some of the new challenges and the changing realities of Japanese society. And I believe that one of the biggest obstacles it will face will be about gender equality.
I have to show you this tweet here. Everyone's nodding. But let me show you this. Mo for America. I doubt that there will be any reform to the patriarchal system of succession at this time. Next in line will be the younger brother and then his son. So they're not thinking there's going to be a change. But I'm really intrigued by Wakako because Wakako, some of the things that you do is activism and changing the way that women are viewed in Japan. If you could, I don't want you to generalize, but if you could give us a hint about what it is like to be a young woman in Japan, what would you share with our audience?
What it's like to be a young woman in Japan, one of the hardest jobs that you ever have to do. So, yeah, being a young woman in Japan, I'm sure it's hard everywhere, but especially in Japan where the patriarchy is very, very, very strong, is definitely not easy. And we face sexual assault like almost every day, whether when taking a train or at workplace, and that's very normalized as well. But with the Me Too movement and all the feminism movement that's been happening for in the last couple of years, I think it's changing a little bit. But again, Japanese people don't really do well with changes, and also this patriarchy, this very much strong patriarchy in Japan, has a lot to do with the Japanese symbolic monarchy, I would say. I don't think, so the next emperor, Naruhito, only have a daughter, but and that is actually kind of like sparking the conversation.
About women's place not just in the monarchy, but women's place in society in Japan. Let me give you an illustration of this. This is the family tree here. Japan's Emperor Akihito abdicates. So you see his parents, then you see the former emperor, the former empress. Let me show you the line of succession, Emperor-to-be Naruhito, his wife. So here is number 1 in succession. Number 2, his younger brother. Number 3, his younger brother's son. So that will be the current emperor, the new emperor's nephew. Missing out completely, his firstborn, Princess Aiko. This is problematic. This is a conversation that he's been having, Sakura. How is that conversation going?
Well, when Princess Aiko was born, there was a bit of a debate about whether a woman should be able to succeed the throne, because at that point, then Emperor Akihito didn't have any grandsons. So it looked very much like there wasn't going to be a male successor at all. Prince Hisahito was born, and that sort of debate really dissipated pretty much. This was back in around 2004 to 2006. But I think in general, with this new era coming in, like the debate will probably kickstart again. Yeah. In general, the Japanese public is very much in favor of having a woman on the throne. Polls have shown that over 70% are in favor of an empress, and also of the throne being passed down the woman's side of the family as well. So this will be a debate that we'll probably be seeing in the near future.
Roland, I'm just trying to see what the urgency is for change to happen. I love the way you describe change in Japan. I'm just looking here. So we have Emperor number 1, Emperor number 2, Emperor number 3. This is at least a generation to go. There is no urgency necessarily. But the way you describe change, could it possibly happen that one day we wake up, one day soon, and Princess Aiko will be the next empress in her own right? Is that even possible?
I hope so. I think, as I said earlier, I think having, as long as she's healthy, Masako in a position of visibility and power, and showing that a woman of such credible accomplishment and global mentality is now in the Imperial Palace. At the same time, I think that, anyone you talk to who comes to Japan, business people, diplomats, artists, will tell you right away that the people you meet in Japan, the Japanese you meet who are bilingual or multilingual or well-traveled or open-minded or progressive, are by and large women. It's an enormous, extraordinary resource in Japan. Sure. And I don't say that cynically. Japanese women are the best traveled, the most globally minded, the most talented, and the most multilingual people.
I hate to interrupt you because at the end of the show you're saying fantastic things about women, and particularly Japanese women. But I have to say thank you so much to all of our guests as we're talking about the new era of Reiwa, which means beautiful harmony. You will find me online at AJ Stream. See you next time. Take care, everybody.